finding true contentment. In this modern day reality, what we're experiencing that we call our lives, we have to ask a simple question: is what is bringing true contentment? Because a lot of the time we're left with feeling such a raw sense of emotions, such a raw state. And ultimately this state, if it's revealing like anxiety, it's almost like we feel that we're not connected to something, and it works extremely interesting when we start to look at it, because our minds project us into a sense of thought. However, we know internally, we feel like almost like it's what we can almost call our intuition. And our intuition knows that something's not right. And it's very subtle, and we can feel it. And we experience this feeling as almost a sense of anxiety, or a sense of just, it can be extreme anxiety, and it can also be very subtle anxiety, depending on where we're at. And for many of us, we may just feel a very slight, subtle sense of anxiety within ourselves, and this is resembling a sense of unknown, or a sense of uncertainty. And what's very interesting is when we look at our mind's projection, if we look at how our minds interact with this reality, our minds are ultimately giving us thought, and we rationalize our thoughts with what we perceive as our best interest. However, there is still something within ourselves which represents almost a sense of, unsureness, being unsure, or being almost anxious. And what's super interesting is that within us all, we have a knowledge of greater awareness. Within us all, we can feel the truth. However, our minds don't perceive truth. They rationalize truth. And we go about our lives, many of us go about our lives trying to almost achieve a sense of contentment, but we're unwillingly and unknowingly ultimately serving a sense of disconnection to a sense of contentment. Because how we go about our lives is we interact with our thoughts, which are ultimately guiding us, or in essence deceiving us to ultimately go in search of a sense of success, or a sense of objective. However, when we're led down this path, we realize that this sense of inner connection or inner contentment is actually getting further and further and further away from our connection to it. And we have to understand that true contentment is ultimately being aware of oneself, is acknowledging that we are already content within ourselves. And when we connect with that inner contentment, when we reveal the true essence of ourselves, we become infinitely connected and infinitely ultimately connected. And we have to understand that the mind can't achieve contentment. It's a matter of perception. The mind can perceive what's going to bring us contentment. However, if it's not true for us, it will always disappoint. It will always disconnect us to our true essence of ourselves. And we have to just be very understanding what the mind's objective is. When we become in control of our minds, we learn to silence the minds. We learn to use the minds as a tool, as a means to ultimately program this reality, give us this reality, give us a sense of, give us our five senses that we are using to perceive and experience this reality. However, the mind, that's the mind's job, is to bring us into this reality, not necessarily bringing us contentment and happiness within this reality. That is something that, as a whole, as an experience within this reality, we need to ultimately come back and understand that true contentment, true alignment, true harmony within ourselves comes not from our minds, comes from ultimately experiencing the true self within ourselves. And it's just extremely concerning and worrying that many of us focus our attention within our minds and follow our thoughts, hoping that it will bring us contentment, or hoping that it's going to bring us a sense of contentment, because that's what we're all striving to achieve, is feeling content. Because content falls in so many different categories of experience, which we perceive as whatever we want to call it: happiness, success, power, whatever. It has so many. What we're really trying to achieve is a feeling of contentment. We want to feel content. And if we are going about our lives and striving to achieve contentment within our mind's focus of objective and thoughts, we must come back and understand that the mind will never bring us true sense of contentment. It can bring experience, it can bring pleasure, it can bring pain, and it can bring us justice. And these are all the things that we need to experience to be able to come back within ourselves and understand that our mind is only perceiving an experience. And it's the experience which is going to lead us back within ourselves to identify with the infinite self, with the alignment to the true self. And the true self resembles a focus of attention which we can ultimately align within. And this focus of attention is effectively the knowing of self. And what is self? And when we start to ask questions of such as, and that's the thing, is we're not taught these questions. We're not taught, who are we? Why are we here? What are we doing here? We have to come back within ourselves and reveal these truths within ourselves, because we're all having a different experience. We're all coming to this reality and coming to this world to ultimately draw back within that awareness, to reveal to ourselves, to enlighten ourselves. And one thing which is certain is that within ourselves lives the infinite potential which, when we align with it, we understand and we draw into it, we draw within it. And when we do this, it reveals aspects of ourselves which will ultimately arise, and when this awareness arises within us, we can use this awareness to bring about change within our lives. And this change is what we will work with and what we will ultimately continue to grow within. And this awareness which we're growing within, which we're drawing our attention to, is ultimately going to guide us and aid us to bringing that contentment within ourselves. Because whatever our minds are ultimately focusing our attention on, it's an experience. It's not the true self. What we have to understand is that every single one of us can experience whatever we want to. We can experience the true inner potential is that we can all experience whatever we want to, and we have no restrictions. We can all connect within ourselves and ultimately draw within the infinite possibility of experience. And we need to ultimately understand that every single one of us has this infinite potential within ourselves. And only our minds can try and lock us into believing the limitation of it. Because as soon as we feel limited, as soon as we deceive our own infinite potential, we effectively break off from that infinite potential. We feel like it's not possible. We feel like it's not real. And that's the false identity which ultimately separates ourselves from feeling content. We have to understand that this reality which we're experiencing is built to keep us away from accessing that infinite potential. When we can move past the realms of limitation, and we do this by our true awareness, our true infinite potential, our true infinite awareness within ourselves, when we can connect to it, we can bring about the true essence of who we are. And we are an imagination. We're living in this reality as an imagination within a physical domain, within a materialistic existence. Everything which we are is just a vibrational code, and we're decoding this reality, and we are led to believe that this code, this experience which we are, is limited. And it's absolutely insane, as we are greater than this domain which we're living in. We're greater than this physical experience which we're living in. And when we can identify within ourselves and draw within this inner knowledge, this inner wisdom, this inner potential of who we truly are, which is an infinite experience taking place within an awareness which is taking place within a programmed human being. We need to understand that we're greater than a programmed human being. We are awareness within infinite potential. And this, once we start to align with this awareness with infinite potential to ultimately reveal itself to infinite potential, we can start to break free of this domain of limitation, which is creating the refinement of our true self or our true potential. And what's magical is when we can start to work with this inner awareness, it will lead us out of this mindset of restriction and limitation. And when we move outside of this domain with our imagination, we understand that we're not limited. No matter what the human experience believes is limiting it to accessing higher domains, higher realities, higher conscious experiences, it's only programming, it's only a perception. And when we can move outside of this perception, we open our imagination, we open our awareness, and we ultimately can become greater than the forces which are attempting to control and limitate our our fulfillment of identifying with the greater self, the greater potentialities outside of this programmed perception which most of us are experiencing. And what's crucial to understand is that true contentment is a matter of perception. And when we can connect back within ourselves and find and align with that infinite potential, we naturally become content within knowing that this is only an experience which we're having, and we are the infinite potential of all experiences. So when we shift our awareness into ultimately identifying with a greater experience, and that greater experience can be anything which we truly align to, we can open our awareness and ultimately draw a sense of contentment within ourselves, which will naturally fulfill our existence. It will naturally bring a sense of identity to us, which we then can work with and grow, and ultimately use this, you could call it identity or inner self or inner potential, whatever you want to call it, and we can work with it to continue to sustain a sense of contentment. Contentment is a matter of perception, and when we draw and open our awareness to a greater perception that we are experiencing in this present moment, we will continue to become more content beings. We will continue to change our perception, continue to open our perception, and continue to welcome and draw a higher sense of awareness within ourselves.